Hello, and welcome back to the Pregnancy Help Podcast powered by Heartbeat International. This is Marketing Minute, our monthly segment focused on practical marketing strategies for pregnancy help organizations. I'm Delaney, manager of Extend Web Services, and last month we talked about using AI to strengthen your marketing. Today, we're taking the next step by talking with IT and cybersecurity consultant Tim Stevens to answer some of the biggest questions around AI, data, privacy, and security so you can use these tools with confidence. Okay, Tim, I want to set the scene here. So can you give us an idea of when we jump forward and we're talking about AI and data, privacy and security, which platforms are we really talking about?
I think for this particular case, we'll really be focusing on kind of the big three. We're talking about ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude. Those are really the three primary AI agents that are out there that everyday folks are using. We're not getting into the nitty gritty stuff where developers or advanced marketing personnel are using. So we'll mostly focus on those. A lot of what we talk about will be general guidance that can cover some of the other tools out there. If you go to something like DeepSeek, Quinn, some of those other models. But we're really going to be focused on that surface level kind of web UI based chat service. And again, this is general guidance. This isn't really, something that should be considered legal advice. I always want to clarify anything that's involving real client data or personal information, organization information. I would say you want to, consult with your own leadership, your own advisors, legal counsel.
It's funny. I've talked with different pregnancy help organization team members, and I've seen a variety of responses when it comes to AI and what's happening. I remember I was just talking with someone recently, mid to late 20s, and they did not want to touch AI with a 10-foot pole. They didn't want anything to do with it. And then I've talked with some team members, and I'm like, I think you're putting entirely too much into AI, or giving it too much information without some kind of parameters. And so I feel like the people listening today, they probably are all across the spectrum. But I am curious, Tim, as someone who's been in the tech web development for so long, what has it been like to see the developments in AI from where you're sitting and with your background?
Oh gosh, you didn't have to say so long. I'm not that old.
I meant that in a good way, Tim. So much experience.
Yeah. So, and you're right. There's folks on both sides of the spectrum that are, all in on AI, and some folks that are not wanting to touch it. And it's been this shift where it used to be people that weren't familiar with something were the ones that were like, oh no, I don't want to touch it. And then the, more technologically advanced or whatever are more into it. However, the shift has happened whenever the people that are more technologically advanced and into things start to realize we've seen some of the privacy issues. We've seen some of the data security issues. We've had our information stolen, used for things that we weren't okay with and weren't aware that it was being used for. So you see people, all over the place there. What I'm hoping folks can get out of this is how to use it appropriately. And also not to be scared of it. So there are ways to integrate AI that are safe and effective and can really help optimize, the efficiency in your organization without feeding it so much where you are getting yourself into hot water with exposing personal information, organization information, or, worst case, client information.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And we really do think utilizing certain AI tools can greatly benefit PHOs, make some things easier and everything. But I kind of putting myself in their position for a moment. Some of the questions that come to mind are things like, you've touched on it a little bit, but how do I even know which AI tools are safe to interact with?
That's a challenging one. And it boils down to mostly, it's not so much, is one AI tool safe to use versus another? There are some out there that I would say, avoid, especially some that are not US based or whatnot. You don't really necessarily want to be sending much data outside the country if you can help it, if you're local US based organization. But it's mostly going to boil down to how are you using it? If you're following appropriate steps, if you have a checklist, which we do have a handout that we can mention in this that folks can get on, okay, how should I use this AI and which ones are really beneficial for me to use for, different specific use cases?
Yeah, and I think that I mean, I've heard some, cautionary tales, I guess, of people how they're using AI, but, as we dive into this conversation, why do you think it's important for people to make sure they have good processes or, rules for how, like, as individuals, they're interacting with AI, but also, probably to a larger degree, as how the organization is interacting with AI?
Yeah, I mean, if you have folks in your organization that are interacting with the chat agent, especially if they aren't following some
Mhm.
sort of, safety protocol with it, you risk exposing, proprietary information. You may have
Mhm.
internal data that's getting out there, or again, Lord forbid, client information that's getting out there that exposes you for,
Yeah.
in a number of ways, obviously. And also, depending on what ways they're using it, if they are engaging it to where it can make changes to, their email or make changes to apps on their computer or
Mhm.
interact with a server or a your local network, then it can do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
AI is like a magical employee that will say yes to anything you want it to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the Gandalf of employees. It will do very, very powerful spells, and it
Uh-huh.
can sometimes do a lot more damage than good if you're not careful with it. So,
That's fantastic. I don't know if you've ever had a Gandalf reference on the Marketing Minute episodes, at least.
well, you're talking to the guy that learned to speak Elvish in middle school. So,
That's true. I forgot about that. Do you still remember any of it?
if I did, you'd never know.
Okay, okay, okay. But going back to data and like talking about like why it's important to have processes and rules for how you're interacting with it. How like you've got these different platforms like Claude and OpenAI and everything. How like what's happening with the data? Like we're clearly feeding prompts and information, interacting with it. We know that AI models are always learning. So what exactly is happening with the data, I guess, information that I'm putting into it? Can I control how much it gets from me? Is it bad that it's learning from me? I've got questions, Tim.
Sure. So something to understand is even if you're using something like Claude Desktop, some folks are under the impression that because it's on your local computer that it's using, it's on your local computer, it's not going anywhere.
Hmm.
And it's important to know that anytime you're interacting with an AI, through Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, even if it's that locally hosted application, it is sending anything you put in there. It's sending it to their servers for it to be processed and for the AI agent to actually, spit out its
Okay.
response and send it back to you. The brain isn't living on your PC. That's just the doorway, essentially for their brain to, actually process your data on their own servers. So
Hmm.
everything you type in there and press send on, it's getting out there. Whether it's learning or not depends on some settings that you may have within the app or within the
Okay.
service. So if you're looking at, again, we'll stick to the big three out there. They all have ways for you to opt out of your data being used to train, especially if you're on a paid version or in a workspace version, for instance, with Gemini. Um, it's a little bit different with each one, but
Hmm.
there's the option to go into the settings and either turn off the setting that says, use my data to train models or, use my data to improve models, things of that nature. So you can disable that to prevent it from keeping your stuff and learning from it long term.
So say somebody is trying to look at how successful their walk for life has been over the past 5 years, or to see the different patterns and how it's grown or how it's decreased, the things that are impacting it. If they wanted to put information, a prompt, if they wanted to put this into one of the three platforms that we're talking about, is there, like if they accidentally put something that they didn't need to, like donor personal information, there's not, is there like a way to be like, oops, let me back that up, let me delete that, or like what happens with that information?
Yeah, so you can delete entire conversations with most of them. Some of them you're able to
Hmm.
do called a kind of a backtrack to a certain state.
Hmm.
So that will reset that conversation or remove the conversation from your local machine. But something that's important to know is that even though it's deleted,
Yeah.
most of them still have it remaining on their servers for typically it's 30 days. So even
Okay.
after you delete it, It's going to last on their server for up to 30 days or so. It's not necessarily something they're looking at, especially again, if you have the training set to off, but it is worth knowing that, hey, that information is technically still exposed on there for a little while. If you have something like Gemini in Workspace, you're able to have it
Hmm.
set close to like 72 hours that it'll retain things. But once you send it out there, it's out there for a little while. There's no just undo button that completely erases the what's called the inference data or the
Hmm.
context from those AI agents servers.
Let's take a moment though, and we said a couple of things that I know that people recognize ChatGPT and
Mhm.
OpenAI, Gemini, like talking about it that way. But you mentioned Claude Desktop. Can you just give a very brief description of like what that is, the difference between like Claude, obviously like in the web browser or the app or something, versus having it interacting with you as a Claude Desktop?
Yeah, on Claude Desktop, you have a few additional tools available to you and a few additional features that can really improve, again, efficiency,
Hmm.
but they all come with a little bit of risk. So with Claude Desktop, you can have it do things directly on your computer.
Hmm.
Actually, control your computer, open apps, interact with certain apps, go through your file system, which if you're connected to, your organization's network, it may be going through your organization's file system
Wow.
as well. The
Hmm.
default settings do have it contained within certain areas, and you have to allow it to do certain things, but it's very easy to allow it to do things. And it's very easy to get confused on what you're allowing it to do if you
Yeah.
aren't familiar with some of the terms. So there have been situations where people have lost a significant amount of data
Yeah.
from using it improperly, not necessarily knowing what they were doing. Um, and if you don't have other things in place like backups, that may be permanently gone. So it can be a little dangerous. It also allows you to interact with you can connect your bank account to Cloud Desktop. You can connect your email, your Google Drive, your Microsoft
Yeah.
storage, all kinds of things to it. So it's great, but scary.
Yeah. And I mean, if somebody doesn't have any kind of tech background, whether it's, I don't know, they just haven't had the opportunity to explore it or they haven't had the interest, but suddenly they're looking at how can they utilize AI to maybe be a good steward of the time and money um, that their organization has. Like how I know we've been touching on this, but with stuff like Claude Desktop and making sure that it only has access to what you're wanting to have access to, how do you even go about doing that? Like if you don't have the background or experience.
Well, one thing I would say is, consult somebody. And that
Hmm.
doesn't mean consult the AI agent asking,
Right.
what it can do. Now, granted, they oftentimes will give you some very candid advice and say, hey, you probably don't want this for XYZ. But consult with someone that may know, even some forums of folks that can share a little bit about what it is. You can do some research to figure out what some of the services are, some of the features are.
Hmm.
But with how rapidly these things are changing, sometimes a Google search, the results you're getting are 2 weeks outdated, and they've had three changes since then as far as the capabilities. So you might be getting outdated information. So I would say a rule of thumb is if you don't know for sure what it is and you have full confidence, just don't enable it. Um,
Okay.
and then consult either a IT specialist or someone if you guys are working with someone to say, hey, is this safe? How can I use it? We also are going to have again, we'll have that handout that's talking about what AIs are safe to use
Hmm.
for certain things, how to use them, and we also have a handout that's talking about it's a checklist essentially to say, okay, here are the things I need to confirm before I either subscribe to an AI service or allow a vendor to integrate a certain AI into my organization.
Yeah, I know that we're gonna have the worksheets that people can like download those and take a look at them. But Tim, could you kind of like touch on that a little bit? Like how, looking at it from the perspective of like before I put a prompt in or before I really go and have it, like say I've opened up Claude or ChatGPT and I'm wanting to work through some things. How can I tell like what information is safe to share?
Yeah. I kind of label information to, three categories, kind of a green, yellow, red.
Okay.
Green items, which would be, go ahead and do it. Things that are public information. If it's information from your website, if you're copying from that and say, hey, here's what I have. Can you help me reword this? Or, here's this. Can you help me expand on this for a social media post or something along those lines?
Yeah.
Made up information is fine as well. If it's something completely fabricated and you're just using a very general example, that's simply going to be okay. Um, where you start getting into more of that yellow area,
Hmm.
which it may be okay, but just be cautious with it. Is if you're using internal information. So if you're sharing internal financial information,
Mm.
if you're sharing internal staff information, that's where it kind of gets into a little bit of that yellow zone where you want to make sure you're not oversharing. You're not sharing anything that could be, uh, used maliciously. Again,
Hmm.
even though the AI agents aren't necessarily going to use them in that way, you just need to, be safe and be a good steward of the information. And then the red, which is where I'd say, really don't do it at all, is, real person tied to your services, client information, don't put it in there.
Hmm.
And that's one of those things where it can be tricky because there are AIs out there that are, confessing HIPAA compliance or at least HIPAA readiness. And you may be able to do a business associate agreement with them where you can do some of that stuff. But for general AI services like the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Geminis, avoid client information at all costs.
Okay. And this is me bouncing around a little bit, but
Mhm.
going in with making sure you know exactly what you are sharing. If an AI tool asks to like, connect with my Gmail or files or something, do you have any idea what I'm actually agreeing to in that instance?
Yeah, and that's where you need to consider what's in your Gmail and
Hmm.
what's in your Drive. So it is technically getting full access to everything at that point. It can do a full scan of all your emails, and it'll go through all of them. What it does with that information, really depends
Hmm.
on what you're using it for or directing it to do. But if once you give it access, it has access. It can read all of
Right.
that stuff. So if you have in your Google Drive or something like that, um, or on your computer, if you give it access to that, if you have
Hmm.
client information on there, intake forms, anything like that,
Yeah.
uh, you're risking exposing some of that. So it's something to be very, very cautious of and to consider very closely before you allow any type of integrations like that.
As a child of the 90s, this is just giving me um a lot of the different things they taught you, like whether it was like dare or even Smokey the Bear, where it's like only you could prevent forest fires.
Yeah.
Um where it's just like stop, stop and think before you take this next move, basically. Okay.
Abs-
Speaking of pitfalls and things that people need to be aware of as they move forward, I know one of the things that you and I have talked about a little bit is just that, scams aren't anything new, but um, but AI is changing the scam game a little bit. Like, it's not abnormal to get texts or phone calls, emails about scams. It's really easy to play off of people's fears. It's really easy to like look convincing if you have just the right information. And I feel like AI has just like really leveled it up. So just like let's take a moment to talk about like how has AI changed its scams we should worry about.
Yeah. Well, not only have they improved the scam systems that were already out there, so
Hmm.
the email scams, that you may have gotten back in the day that were at first a little, concerning, or you may have gotten fooled in the 90s and 2000s that
Yeah.
everybody just got used to. And they're like, oh, this is obvious. Well, they've advanced. AI has given not only the scammers advanced data and, scraping abilities to be able to find all kinds of information that
Hmm.
gives them a little more, perceived credibility in what they send, but it killed some of the old giveaways like the bad grammar, typos, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, that is gone. AI is polishing that. AI writes very clean. It's
Hmm.
very concise, and it can match a certain voice or style. So if you have public information from you posting social
Hmm.
media, blogs, newsletters, anything that you send out there, it can analyze that, match your voice and tone, and then spoof, your email address and send things out that very much read like you. So that's come about and improved. But then with the advance in AI, voice cloning and
Oh
whatnot.
yeah.
If you have a 10, 15, 30-second clip of your voice out there somewhere, it can mimic your voice very convincingly and send a quick message or, leave a quick voicemail that says, "Hey,
Hmm.
I'm stranded. I need, $5,000. Can you transfer X amount of money, to this bank account?
Yeah.
Quickly, please. I'm on a life-saving mission. I need to get to this, area." So it's gotten very advanced in the scam market, unfortunately, as all things do with technology. Once technology advances, it really is some of the no-gooders that get out there and use it the most.
In terms of scams hitting nonprofits or pregnancy centers, what are the ones that maybe they might have to be a little bit more uh, aware of?
Yeah. Well, the one I already mentioned, if someone calls, your director calls and says, "Hey, I
Hmm.
need X amount of money." So wire
Yeah.
transfers are a big one. Um, you can have donors call you, either established or, potentially a new donor that is wanting to speak with you and wants to get a little bit of information first. And sometimes they're trying to get a little bit of information from, the person that answers the phone so that they can use that information for the second part of their scam, which is maybe that wire transfer or something. Um, there's all oh gosh. We've seen things where folks have called and said, that they're a client and they're just trying to, get them to mess up. They'll have the strangest things, and just trying to get them to say something that they can misconstrue
Hmm.
as hostile towards women or any number of things. So there are a lot of ways that the AI can anything that can come up malicious. All it takes is, send a prompt and it's off to the races and it's handling everything.
Yeah.
So
It's crazy that we have such a like powerful tools at our fingertips now, but it since you've already brought Gandalf into the conversation, um, it reminds me of Peter Parker's uh Uncle Ben, who's like, with great power comes great responsibility. And I really feel like that applies so well to what we have available to us now with AI.
it does, because if you are a leader in a pregnancy center, if you're a director or something, then you already understand that you have responsibility for the data and all those things. But especially someone new in an organization, they might not understand the level of scrutiny. Number one,
Hmm.
that's the movement's under, but also the level of data and the amount of information that's potentially in your environment, in your data set, that it's personal information, yours and the organization. And so it's so easy to expose that and have it out there. So having some sort of policy, AI
Hmm.
policy, which I know you guys kind of touched on a little bit last
Yeah.
month, would be very good. Having something that says, "Hey, this is how we're doing AI." You can also set up, say, "Hey, these are the AIs we're going to use," and you could look at getting business plans with those where you have some monitoring options in place, as well as you have some limitations and some means of managing and kind of putting some guardrails on how people use it. So that's
Hmm.
something worth considering looking into as well.
I know that I've been pelting you with questions, but I've got a few more, Tim. 'Cause you're just providing such great feedback. Um, One of the things that it's common to see now is just like things where it's like become an AI expert in 2 weeks, and so I don't think those are scams. I think they're kind of sometimes scam adjacent because I don't know how many people can claim to be an AI expert in something that is kind of constantly like evolving and changing. So people who are interested in learning more or utilizing AI more, like where where are even good places for them to find information? Like obviously we've done very high level um talks about AI on the Marketing Minute podcast, but that there's still so much to learn, especially like hands-on experience. Where can someone go to get that? Yes, you can experiment on like your computer and taking baby steps, but if you're really wanting to dive into information available, where should they go?
Yeah, and that's kind of one of those things that's challenging because as the AI agents and the stuff under the hood is changing. I mean, like I said, every couple of weeks there's some sort of update that really changes the core of how it works, how it interprets prompts, how it handles data and sends stuff back.
Hmm.
Uh, that it's really challenging to keep up with it and find resources online that are relevant to how things are now. But you can look at things, we'll start with the easiest ones, which, you can go on YouTube and find very reputable places. I'm not saying just find the first video that talks about the exact
Right.
thing that you're looking for. Look for people that have, an established, following, that have, a large number of subscribers, things like that. That's probably going to give you some decent information. If you're looking for full-fledged, learning and, getting some sort of um, either certificate or some sort of, specific, specialist role
Hmm.
or whatnot, go to some of the sources. So NVIDIA, which, a lot of people think about that. Oh, it's the graphics card company. They have some fantastic courses
Okay.
on AI and whatnot. That's probably more of the advanced stuff though. Unless you're really wanting to be a full-fledged AI, specialist, that's probably overkill. But Google has some as well. Google has some from ranging from very simple to advanced. Um, there's a few other out there that are solid, but I think Google would be a great place to start. Microsoft also has some of their own. Just the thing to keep in mind is it's always changing. So this isn't a set it and forget it or learn it and think you're good to go.
Sure.
Because as soon as if you get a certificate or you get something, as soon as it's printed on paper, something's changed that it means you have to do the continued learning on it. So
Yeah, that makes me think of like when you drive a new car off the lot, like it automatically depreciates as soon as you put it out. There's something new for you to learn. Um, I think it's obviously Microsoft has its own site. I think it'd be easy to navigate to courses there. But when you talk about Google, I could be wrong, but I feel like a lot of people's interaction with Google is like using Google search or something. So if they're wanting to specifically find some courses that Google is providing on this, where would they go to find that? Find those?
I just Googled it to confirm the link. So it's grow.google. Let's see. Yeah, grow.google. If you go there, so it has essentially essential AI skills for everyone, as it says. So you again, it's going to range from very simplistic things,
Mhm.
just learning how to prompt it appropriately, what kind of things, to tell it to give it the context it needs to give you the appropriate information, to a full-fledged, Google AI professional certificate, which that's going to be way more advanced for 99% of the people that are going to see this most likely, but
Mhm.
it's worth knowing what you can get into. You may start with a basic one and, get the bug and want to keep going.
Sure.
Something else that's important to keep in mind is as you're learning these things, it shouldn't be that you learn AI and then you're able to pull in cybersecurity into it, or you're able to pull
Mhm.
in, software development into that as the secondary deal. A lot of things you're going to want to have a specialty, cybersecurity. I'm just using the ones that I'm in,
Yeah.
cybersecurity or IT or websites or development, and then learn the AI to apply that to your specialty.
Sure.
Because AI can, while it's very good and efficient, it can also give you a false sense of security where
Oh, yeah.
you know, you're going to learn something and then you're going to go full into it. And then you run into all these kinds of gotchas about the under the hood stuff that you may not be
Mhm.
familiar with. So it's worth, it's worth knowing that you can learn, but you want to keep it in context.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Tim, I know that you it's like the both sides of the same coin. On one hand, you want to make sure that people when they're interacting with AI are doing it in as safe way as possible for themselves and
Mm.
their organizations. But on the other hand, you really do want people to take advantage of these tools that are out there now. You don't want them to like necessarily be scared. Like there's a difference between being cautious and being scared to interact. So I don't know if there's anything that you want to say in terms of, I guess, encouragement as people are looking at these AI tools available to them.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a few times in here, as I was saying some of the capabilities of AI, I say, hey, that's kind of
Hmm.
scary. And there is a difference between something that's scary and then something that you should be just scared of. Um, I don't like horses. I'm scared of horses. That doesn't mean horseback riding's bad. Uh,
Sure.
So there's no reason to, avoid AI entirely. It's just, you need to know where your data is going
Mhm.
so that you can use it with confidence. Um, and so that you can, ensure folks below you in your organization are also using it appropriately. Uh, you know, they're smart and safe. It's not the opposite of using it. It's what makes using it work. So if you
Mhm.
are using it appropriately, you're going to see massive improvements in efficiency,
Mhm.
and probably even in quality because humans make a lot of mistakes. It's incredible the amount of grammar that I have learned just from using AI. So it's one of those things where I don't want anyone to walk away from this scared of it because I shared all of these, cautionary tales. I
Sure.
want people to just be aware of some of the pitfalls out there so they can avoid them.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I know that some of the things that we're interested in having further conversations about is more conversations about AI in terms of how, honestly, just even how it's changing the search game. I think that's something that we'll probably have our digital advertising specialist, Jack, on to talk about. And if I can convince you, Tim, to do another episode with us, if like the three of us could have a really good conversation about that. I know
Yeah.
something else you and I have talked about is potentially having a deeper conversation about security in general when it comes to you know all things interweb, uh
Yeah.
probably other things as well, like when it comes to cybersecurity. um and the reason, I mean, obviously I think the search one, it's obvious why we would talk about that on a marketing minute, but in the future why we might delve deeper into cybersecurity is just because a lot of what we're encouraging you to do um in these marketing minute episodes is to take advantage of digital solutions, digital tools, and when it comes to
Mhm.
marketing and placing your organization in front of men and women in need of your services. So we'll continue to have the both and. Yes, we're going to talk about a lot about marketing, but we're also going to have episodes like this one so that you can have as safe and productive of a time as possible as you interact with these tools. Um, but Tim, we are now landing this plane. Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything you want to leave the listeners with before we close out today?
I would just go back to what you were saying at the beginning, when we're talking about the AI eager and the AI kind of avoidant.
Hmm.
For those that are avoidant, I would say, please give it a try. Just experiment with it a little bit even from a personal standpoint, don't start using it for the organization or anything. Just do very basic things. You could do something as simple as, hey, ChatGPT, write me a story about, you know, the three little pigs after the wolf went away.
Right.
Something silly like that. Just get familiar with it a little more comfortable to see how it works and see that it's not all big and bad and dangerous and scary. And then for those that are really into the AI and very eager to use it, I hope that this can show them a little bit about how they can very quickly fall into some of the pitfalls we talked about, and that
Hmm.
they can really stop to think and consider how they're approaching things to make sure they're using things appropriately.
I like it. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
And thank you to all you lovely listeners for tuning in for another Marketing Minute. I hope you have a great day.